So again, good day. For today's lesson, we will be talking about the JavaScript fundamentals. So as mentioned last time, we have discussed JavaScript is a programming language that adds interactivity and custom behaviors to our sites. So it is a client-side scripting language, which means it runs on the user's machine and not on the server, as other web programming languages such as PHP and Ruby do. So that means JavaScript is reliant on the browser's capabilities and settings. So first thing and foremost that we need to know is that JavaScript is case sensitive. So it is important to know, and as well as when we say case sensitive, so you should be or you should always notice if it should be on a capital letters or with the use of the small letters. So a variable named my variable, as you can see in the presentation, is a variable named my variable, and a variable named my variable will be treated as three different objects. Why? Again, because JavaScript is case sensitive. So from the first variable that we have, so we use lowercase letters for other characters, and we have uppercase for V. And then the next one, we use all in lowercase. And the other, we use uppercase for MYV and lowercase for the rest of the characters. So those are three different objects. And white space, such as tabs and spaces, are ignored. So unless they're part of a string of text and enclosed in code. So do not forget that. So those are the simple things that usually has been not given importance, but are really a relevant part of our JavaScript. So moving on, so last time in our discussion, we have mentioned already statements. So statements are makes the browser display on what we have in our example. So it makes the browser display an alert with the phrase "thank you." So I think we have done this on our example on our discussion last time. So through the use of the alert, then our string thank you, so anything inside the quotation marks will be displayed on our alert box. So the alert box looks like this, which will be displayed over our browser or on our platform once we run it. Next, we have comments. So comments are very important for developers. So there are different ways of inserting comments in our codes. So comments could be used as your fallback when you are maintaining or you are updating a specific program. And as well as if you will be presenting your capstone project in the future, so comments would be beneficial for you to easily locate which part of the codes, tells, or functions as questioned by the panelists. So for single line comments, we use two slash characters and at the beginning of the line. So just what you can see on our example. So again, comments are not treated or are ignored in a program. Then we can also include multiple line comments. So we use the same syntax that you've seen in CSS, everything within the syntax. So we have there our slash followed by an asterisk. So, and another for closing, asterisk and then slash characters is ignored by the browser. So, as you can see in the example, so that is the multi-line comment. So, that would depend on the amount of characters or the notes that you would like to include in your codes. So, would there be the question would be, would there be a limit for the comments? No. So that would be regression of the programmer or the developer. So if you don't like to put comments, that's fine. If you want, so that would be fine as well. The next, moving on with variables and data types. So data types, so a program normally handles data in some form on another. So for example, a checkout screen for online billing might process the following data. So we could have the card number, the cardholder ID, the price, and the shipping information. So you might be imagining right now the different data that you'll be using for your projects. So all these items can be termed as data. So from uh, the last proposal that I have checked with regards with blood inventory system. So some of the data that will be treated or will be handled on that system would be the blood type, the donor name, that could also include, might as well, the demographic data of the donors. So when we say demographic data, that would include the name, the birthday, the address, or some others would use the BMI as well of the donors. Kasi 'di ba, when we are donating blood, so they are also checking the BMI or if you are healthy to be a donor. Moving forward, the values we assign to variables fall under a few distinct data types. So those data types could be number, string, and Boolean. And other data types could include null and undefined. So for numbers, so you can assign variables numeric values. Okay. And then for string, so it is another type of data that can be saved to a variable and which is basically a line of text. So if you could remember our example a while ago, which is thank you, which is inside double quotation mark. So that is an example of a string. And then for Boolean, so we assign a variable if it is true or false. So that means we only have two values for Boolean. And for null, so assigning a variable of null simply says define this variable but give it to no inherent value. And then for undefined, so the simplest of these data types that we have mentioned is the undefined. If we declare a variable by giving it a name but no value, so that variable contains a value of undefined. Moving on with our variables. So a variable is like an information container. You give it a name and then assign it a value. So just like we are doing in algebra, if you can still remember. So this value, you can assign value as a number, as a text string, or an element in a DOM, or a function, or anything that you need to have for your program. So this gives us a convenient way to reference that value later by name or by calling out its name. So the value itself can be modified and reassigned in whatever way our script's logic dictates. So in the example that we have in our presentation, so we have declared here a variable a variable with a name or with a value, with a name number and with a value 10. Then another variable with the name message, and the value is a string. String, which is JavaScript, is fun. So that is a string because it is inside double quotation marks. So there are some rules that we need to remember in naming variables. So it must start with a letter or an underscore. Next rule that we need to remember is that it may contain letters, digits, and underscores in any combination. It may not contain character spaces. As an alternative, you can use underscores in place of spaces or close up by the space and use camel case instead. And then it may not also contain special characters. So those are some of the simple variable rulings that we must always remember or take into consideration. Next, so for our string variable, so again, a string or a text string is a series of characters like Batangas State University. So as you can see, it is inside double quotation mark, indicating that it is a string. So in the example, we have declared a variable with a variable name university and its value Batangas State University. And then you'll have to end it with a semicolon. Do not forget the semicolon at the end, guys. And then for our numeric values, so numbers can be written with or without decimal. So it's up to you or it's up to the data that you will be using for your program. So for our example here, we have a variable with a variable name num1 with a value 25. So in declaring numeric values, guys, you don't have to put it inside double quotation marks. And then we have another value, a variable rather, with a variable name num2 with a value 25.02. So extra large or extra small numbers can be written with scientific or exponential notation just like in the example. So we have here the variable name x with the value 123 or 123 with an exponential value or exponent of 5. So again, guys, just like the other with our string variables, do not forget the semicolon at the end of each line. And then, as mentioned, with our Boolean variables, we only have two values, which are the true or false. So Booleans are often used in conditional testing. So in the example, we can see on how to declare our Boolean variable. So again, we'll be using var and then our variable name, running, and the value true. Then for our null and identified variable, so the data type is likely undefined if we declare a variable by giving it a name but no value. That variable contains a value of undefined. And then assigning a variable of null simply says define this variable but give it to inherent value. So in the example, so the first example is var with a variable name. So it is an defined variable. Why? Because it has no value. And then the other one is a variable with a variable name with a value null. So this will just um, set the variable name into no inherent value. Then next, we also have arrays. So an array is a group of multiple values, which we call members, that can be assigned to a single variable. So the values in an array are said to be indexed, meaning you can refer to them by number according to the order in which they appear in the list. So the first member is given the index number 0, the second is 1, and then so on. So depending upon the number of values being declared. So we can avoid a lot of future coding headaches by keeping this in mind. So in the example that we have variable with a variable name cars. And then we have the values Ford, Peugeot, and BMW. So again, we can index those variables or those values by index number 0 for Ford, and then so on. So for example, you'll be using it, or you'll want to call the value in index 0. So you can just call on alert if you will be using an alert box. So alert, then the variable name cars, and then index 0 or 0. Cars, and then bracket 0, and then our semicolon. So that would give us the value, or that would provide us the value for it. Moving on with expressions. So, programming in any language requires manipulating data. In some cases, the data will be literal, such as text strings, but quite often more complex expressions will be used. Anything that can be evaluated by the JavaScript interpreter can be taught as an expression, just as the literals or any data that appear directly in a program. So expression is any valid unit of code that resolves to a value. So every syntactically valid expression resolves to some value, but conceptually there are two types of expression. First is expression with side effects. So this one are those that assign value to a variable, just like x is equal to 10. So just like in our algebra as well. Ano po? And then another type of expression is the expressions that resolves to a value. So for example, x plus y, wherein we incorporate arithmetic operations. So expressions can use different operators or no operators at all. So again, that would define on how you want to treat the data that you have. Individual expressions can be combined with operators to create a compound expression whose value is evaluated at runtime. So in this one, we have x plus y multiplied by 20. And then we have the variables running and valid. So do not think of it right now. We'll be doing these expressions during our practical coding. And then for the operators, so operators are special functions that operate on 1 to 3 values or the operands. So the most common operators require one operand, or what we call unary operators, or two operands, which we call binary operators. So for unary operators, it requires a single operand, which can be before or after the operator, while binary require two operands, one on the left hand side and one on the right hand side of the operator. And then for the assignment operator, so the assignment operator are used to assign values to variables. So as you can see in the table, so we have the different operators that we can use. So usually what we have is the equals. Ano po? So to set our variables. But the rest, we can still use it again depending on how we should treat the given data to you for your program. And then arithmetic operators are used to perform mathematics. So we have addition, subtraction, multiplication, the division, modulus, the increment, and decrement. So this is somewhat a review for you. And then we can also use comparison operators. So they are generally used inside a construct such as an if statement where you need to compare two items. So we can use equal to, not equal to, the greater than, the less than, greater than or equal to, the less than or equal to, is equal to, and not equal to. And then we can also incorporate the use of the logical operators and, or, and the not. Any questions with our fundamentals of JavaScript?